So, Steve, I want to talk about the independent care review. So that was under Josh McAllister. My part in that, so I was to represent 16 to 18 year olds because at the time I was working as a manager in that provision. And one of the recommendations for that was how can we ensure that young people in these provisions are supported, but people are not just thrown into these houses which are run down, which are in deprived areas. And one of the recommendations was to regulate that provision. So that means Ofsted coming in like they do with children's homes and then making sure that staff are trained, but these houses are up to date, that there's no safeguarding issues there. And that was something I was quite passionate about because my own experience was at 16 we were placed in a bed set, there was no support. But then going back into that provision as a professional and just seeing, but some of these houses, which, I know from your experience as well, is that they're not fit for purpose.
No, and I think people like me that work in the care sector for the right reasons, have seen those provisions that you're talking about that actually you wouldn't necessarily want to put your dog in.
Yeah.
So there's the majority of us people that want to help young people are embracing the fact that you've managed to push this through and get the services regulated so that we can get rid of those independent people that are doing the job just for the money. They're just putting kids in beds no matter where they are, no support, and just taking the money. So the regulation side of things, it's something that needs to happen. My background is children as well, so I know the standard at which we would keep children in from an Ofsted perspective. That needs to transfer now to 16 plus semi-support living. But the system to a degree is broken from a provider's perspective because it's putting organisations such as us, we're all waiting for what they call the URN number, and local authorities will not place young people with a provider that doesn't have a URN number. So they run the risk of then losing staff, potentially going out of business because they've got beds, they've got staff, but no children.
Yeah, and then one of the ramifications of that is, which I've seen travelling the country, is that then these kids are getting sent to bed sits. These kids are being placed in these accommodations where they're being groomed into criminal organisations again. Young girls in particular are placed within, deprived areas, hotspot areas as we call it, where it's well known to the police for that kind of activity. And it doesn't work. You're back at square one. So with the trajectory you started off with is by regulating provisions is to keep everyone safe. But then if there's a loophole within that regulation, it's like a vortex, you're back at square one. And these kids are no better off at all.
Because these young people that are now staying in bed sits and Airbnbs, more often than not, they're with agency staff. The agency staff don't really care because they're not consistent staff. The young people don't build any relationships with the staff team, so they just want to run. So we're in this downward spiral because of something that needs to happen.
What's your vision then as a provider? What is your vision? What do you see? How does the future look for this organisation?
For KYS, as coming in as the new CEO, my vision is that we produce and deliver high quality care and support for young people from 16 to semi-independence and take them through to their young adults so that we can make them the best they possibly can.
Talk me through that. As a care leaver, if I'm coming into your provision, which and I've had a bad experience, you say you want to make sure that they get the best care. What's the best care? What does it look like? What makes it different? That's what I'm interested in.
The best care for me is to embrace that young person and treat them the way that I would want my own children to be treated, and support them the same way as I would my own children. A lot of these young people, as you quite rightly said, have experienced huge traumas throughout their life. We all have trauma at some point, but it's about pulling on what we've got and let's try and get the young person on our side, engage with them, enlist our time on them. Show them that life isn't all bad. It is about sharing things with them.
So from my travels around the country, which I'm quite passionate about, and I see a lot of bad places. I see a lot of people who just don't care. There's a lot of emphasis on money, and I know, speaking to you, you're very passionate as well. Is that what makes it different in regards to projects and pathways? So if I'm coming into this provision, I've got no education, I've got no job. So how will you, as a CEO for this organisation, make sure that these young people have the right pathway? What is that pathway?
For me, it's about, it starts off before the young person comes in.
Right.
So for me, that pathway starts with my staff. So it's making sure that my staff are passionate about the job they do, not just in the job for the money, or just, they're in it because they want to make a difference for young people. So to enable them to do that, it's for me making sure that the staff are suitably trained and have the tools in their bag to be able to help young people deal with the trauma. But it's then also trying to identify with the young person what their need is, and making sure that that young person has a voice. And that's not just a voice in no, I don't want to go on an activity. It's about the voice in the risk assessment that you put down for them. They need to be part of that risk assessment because they're the person that tells you. I can say to you, Chris, what are the risks that you find when you're out on the streets? So that you can then tell me, so that I can kind of work with you to put together a proper risk assessment that actually works for you. It's about the environment that the young person's in. Not for me to say, right, well, we need a grey sofa, we need a blue wall, we need a yellow ceiling, or whatever. It's about the young person. The young person is going to feel more at home if they feel that the home is theirs. And, if we can do all of those things, and then with the education, young people aren't going to just volunteer to go to education if they haven't done it for 6 months or a year. It's about how do we, if we don't necessarily get them out to education, as workers, what can we do within the home in the first instance to try and engage with them so that they are learning? You can play a board, you can play Monopoly with a young person.
It's a form of education, of course.
Because you're using money, you're bargaining to sell a house. So there are things that we can do as support workers to get them engaging with something that is a form of education.
Can I just ask you in that question, Steve, it's quite important. If a young person comes here, how many hours a week are they getting support? Is it one-to-one support? What does that look like?
Going forward, the plan is for all young people to be on one-to-one support.
Right, so how many times a week would that happen?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day. So they would have 24/7 one-to-one support.
Right.
Because I don't believe that the majority of young people that come into semi-independence and supported living, and please correct me if I'm wrong, aren't actually ready for the big wide world. And just because they're 16, that isn't a magic number that then says, I can look after myself, I can do my bedroom, I can cook a meal, I can do my washing. So actually, you can't just say that actually that young person only needs 2 hours a day. They need support right up to the age of 18, and some people need it past that.
So you say past that then, so if you're looking after people to 16 to 18, what's the trajectory if they leave this provision? Are you going to make sure that they're going into something positive?
Well, I think, we have a duty of care to make sure that actually, if at 18, a local authority comes to me and says, right, this person's 18 on this day, we need to make sure, they're moving on. For me, I think I still have that duty of care to say, where are they going? What level of support are they going to get? This is what they've had, this is what they've needed. So we have to be that voice for that young person to make sure that the next move on placement is suitable for them. Otherwise, we're failing. The 2 years of good work that we've done is just going to be washed down the pan.
And I see that a lot of the time where you put in 2 solid years, you get a lot of key sessions, one-to-one sessions, you do great work with people, you get them from that really bad place to a place of positivity, and then at 18, they leave, and then they go into something absolutely, completely the opposite, and it takes them back to square one. And then when you months down the line, you go looking for that young person, you find out that young person's fallen into arrears, that young person's in debt, or that young person has gone back to criminal organisations. And that's where there's a massive failure. That's why they call it the care cliff, because a lot of them do leave. It doesn't matter how much work you put in here. I think for me personally, as an organisation, like you've just said, you've got to be also prepared to make sure that when they do leave, it is your responsibility what happens in their future.
Yeah, totally. And I think for me, from my younger years working, one of my biggest frustrations with local authorities was As an example, I was working with a young person, and he was on a 2-to-1. He was in a single occupancy placement, and when he first came into us, his behaviour was extreme. So over a period of months, we got him down to that he was at a point of working 1-to-1. And this young person had settled into the placement. We were having next to no instances with him at all. He had a consistent staff team around him, a consistent home manager. What did the local authority do then? They turn around and say, actually, we need to move him now to a cheaper provision.
Yeah, and it happens.
Because his behaviour is so that you've changed him, he's not that young person anymore. And I went to them and said, why do you think his behaviour, or we are not getting the incidences that we're having? Oh, because he's grown up, he's moved on from that. No, we're not getting it because he feels safe in the home he's in. He knows the staff team he's working with. He is now settled. You're going to move him, and I will guarantee you will have, you will see the same behaviours that you saw before we got to that point.
Wow.
They still moved him,
Yeah.
and it happened. And I wanted to go back to them and say, told you so.
And is that for you as a CEO? Is that kind of your mission, your catalyst?
I don't want that to happen to young people,
Of course, yeah.
irrespective of age.
But is that your motivation to make this place work? And you want to see people, young people in particular, people like me,
Definitely.
go on to bigger and better things and to
Definitely.
succeed. Yeah.
Definitely.
Wow.
100%.
Amazing.